As we open in session 1, you'll see that in your workbook, I just have a couple questions to get you thinking and all of us get our mind around the power of emotions. Question number 1, what has the power to transform a tender, loving mother into a beast of fury as I watched her pick up an 18-month-old by one arm, slam it into a dryer, and then jerk it back into a chair? I know that mom loved that little kid, but what in the world happened? What has the power to take normal, loving, good parents and turn them into neck-bulging, vein-popping, screaming adults who say the same thing over and over and over into the face of a kid staring back at them that's overwhelmed? What has the power to take good friends and a couple with dreams and passionate lovers, and over times of bitterness and resentment, turn them into cold, calculated, critical marriage coexisters who only do what's absolutely necessary to keep living under the same roof? When you think of extended families, what has the power to turn a festive holiday gathering into a gut-twisting, name-calling, take sides, no-holds-barred family feud where relations are broken and people don't talk to each other anymore? How does that happen? And finally, what has the power to take a calm, cool, quiet, conscientious worker and turn him into a automatic weapon-toting, going from office to office and floor to floor, spraying bullets, and no one even knew he was mad? Killing people indiscriminately because he was dismissed from his job. I want you to write in your notes, here's the answer: our emotions. Our emotions. Designed as a gift from God, underline that. Your emotions aren't bad. Under a gift from God, but there are times, places, and circumstances that literally bring out emotions that destroy. The Apostle James is the half-brother of Jesus, and he wrote the very first book of the New Testament. And after talking about considering it all joy and enduring suffering, he's writing to a group of Jewish believers, and their world has fallen apart. If you believed in the Messiah, you would probably get excommunicated from your family. Some husbands left their wives, some wives left their husbands. There was economic disaster. Literally, he says, to those that are dispersed abroad, they're going everywhere, and there's persecution. And then in verse 19, he says, my brothers, take note of this. Let everyone be quick to listen, slow to speak, and then underline this in your notes: slow to anger, for man's anger does not bring about the righteous life that God desires. Now, I remember teaching through the book of James. And I was teaching through the book of James, and I got to this passage, and probably partly because of my background growing up with a dad that had major anger issues, and probably my background in psychology and grad work and undergrad work, I realized this anger thing was really big. And so I decided to take a little cul-de-sac and teach a little bit on anger. And as I did, we had a lady in our church named Dr. Becca Johnson. And she said, you know, Chip, this is way bigger than you think. I said, really? She goes, yes, I'm a counselor here in the Santa Cruz and in the Bay Area, and have a private practice. I've written a couple books with InterVarsity, and I counsel primarily Christian families. You have no idea what anger is doing in the homes. Well, when I got done with that series, Becca and I teamed up together, and we wrote a book called Overcoming Emotions That Destroy. And I kind of took the biblical avenue, and then she gave just, insight and help that was above my pay grade. And so at times I'm going to pause and I'm going to give you some insight from her. And here's my promise. We all have anger issues. Some of us are very aware of them. Some of you aren't. It doesn't make you bad or wrong to have anger issues. But if you don't recognize how to respond to them, if you don't come and grasp, this is how I respond to anger, this is what's going on in my life, it literally can destroy the most important people and things in your life. And in fact, here's the promise. If you'll stay with me all 4 sessions, and I'm going to literally say to you that I want you to go privately, and if it's just a roommate or just a husband and wife or just a family, you don't have to start a small group or anything, but if you would just, after each session, do where it says talk it out and get these things on the table and begin to discuss them, you are going to realize that maybe some of the deep-seated things that you struggled with for years and years and years, God wants to do a breakthrough in your life. In light of that, here's the warning. Under pressure, we are all prone to blow a fuse, those who blow up, or burn the house down. There's a short, Some people, the anger, it comes out and you know it, and other people, it goes down. It's kind of like going out to dinner and there's a little short in the wire and, you don't know anything's wrong, and that short over time, there's a little spark and doesn't seem like a big deal, and you go out to dinner and some night you come back and your house is in flames and then in ashes. And that's what anger does to people. Now, some of you don't think that anger is probably all that big a problem, but let me ask you, have you ever gotten angry when you were unfairly treated, when someone blamed you for something that wasn't your fault, when you felt ignored or misunderstood, or someone belittled you or put you down? Did you ever get mad when someone just said, walked into your office and gave you advice that you really didn't ask for and really didn't want? When they criticized you? Did you ever get angry when someone kicked you or pushed you or threatened you? Did you ever get angry when someone cut in front of you and then made a gesture with one of their fingers off their hand that seemed to dismiss you? I mean, do you realize that in a moment that normal, regular, seemingly healthy people drive to work all over America, and someone cuts in front of someone or pulls out a little and they have to slow up, and there's this amazing response, and we've all been on the freeway, right? And those 2 cars are chasing each other. And we've all read of the stories of, because someone pulls out in front of someone has a gun in their car, and someone ends up dead. Dr. Johnson, those were the kind of things that I thought when people get angry. Are you ready for this? Lean back. She has 50 things that tend to make people angry. And before I read these, I'm going to go fast. I just want you to lean back and ask yourself, wait a second, these are the kind of things that happen to everyone at some time in their life almost. She writes, have you ever gotten mad because someone in line cut you off, someone misunderstood what you said, someone ignored your feelings, because of the breakup of a relationship, because someone made you feel trapped and smothered and were controlling? Do you ever get mad because you felt like a failure, because someone broke your trust, because of past abuse, someone lied to you, because you had to wait in a very, very long line at the grocery store or the bank? Because your children weren't obeying? Because the waitress was not only slow but brought the wrong food? Because you stubbed your toe in the middle of the night? Because you find out way too late you're out of toilet paper? Because the line in the public restroom is very, 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 very long and you really, really, really have to go? Because your spouse forgot to call and was very late? Because the clothes you wanted to wear are in the hamper and they're not clean? Because your spouse had an affair? Because you ran out of time and you didn't get the things done today that you were absolutely committed to do? Did you ever get mad because you drove all the way across town and there's a sign on the door? It's Monday, it's 1 o'clock, we are temporarily closed? Did you ever get mad when one of your kids relentlessly demands your time? Or when you forgot to do something and you know you're going to look bad at work? Do you ever just get mad because you don't have any time for yourself? Or because a clerk was rude? Or you were in a hurry? And you just was like, how can you hit every single red light? You ever get mad when your boss doesn't appreciate you? Or someone at work takes credit for what you did? You ever get mad when somebody tracks in dirt when you just cleaned the house, or when the driver in front of you is going very, very slow. And finally, did you ever get mad when someone you love very much dies? You know, those are not like things that never happen to people. Those are things that happen to everyone sooner or later. And we all respond with some kind of anger when these kind of things happen to us. But some people don't even know you're angry. Some of you have been trained from childhood, as we'll learn, to think that anger is bad. Some of you explode with your anger and then feel very bad about it later. And some of you just realize you just leak it out in ways and ruin relationships and have no idea why the things going on down inside of you never get resolved. Let's look at anger from God's perspective. Here's a definition. Anger is neither good nor bad. Why don't you underline good or bad? Because a lot of you don't believe that. It is a charged, morally neutral, emotional response of protective preservation. Let me show you two things. Number one, positively, it can be a healthy emotion that motivates us to correct attitudes, behaviors, or injustices that we perceive to be wrong. Right? Jesus walks in the temple, my house shall be a house of prayer, and he turns over temples. David says he's mad. Goliath, you're calling the living God, my God, that? I mean, we have multiple. Moses takes the tablets and throws them down and breaks them. He's really ticked off because injustice has occurred, and he's going to make it right. That opening illustration that I gave about the lady with the dryer, that was the first time I ever understood that anger could be positive. I grew up in a very good family in general, but my dad went through a lot of damage before PTSD and all that in World War II. He killed a lot of people, he saw horrendous things, and no one processed anything, and inside of him, he was like a powder keg all the time. And man, I was scared. You did not want to make my dad mad. And so I thought anger was wrong. And the few times that I expressed my anger, I found out it may be dangerous. Boy, I don't want to go there. And I'll never forget sitting, it's the first church we ever pastored, been there a couple years. Probably by most standards, we were pretty poor, making maybe $1,700, $1,800 a month. And we lived out in a little rural area, and we couldn't afford a washer and dryer, so we went to the laundromat. Anybody remember those? And laundromats have dryers that you just feed quarters in, and the clothes never get dry. And so we had a jar of quarters that we kept, and so I'm waiting in there, and I'm trying to be a good husband, like, honey, you go on home, and I'll dry all the clothes. And I'm sitting there, and that lady comes in, and she did exactly what I described. I mean, she looked a little unkept, and she looked like she might be, had sort of a bad day. But it was just the cutest little, about 18-month-old, maybe 2 years old at the big. And I forget, went over and reached and touched something, and the lady why did you do that? And picked up the kid, and I thought his arm was going to come out and literally smashed his face into a dryer. And then chucked him down. And I was sitting over on, one of those big tables where you fold stuff. And now, by the way, this is not the right response to anger. Okay, my motivation was pretty good. What went through my mind was, I think I'm going to punch this lady in the mouth. And then thoughts like, pastor in jail attacks woman in laundromat. But I remember getting up and saying, ma'am, and just restraining my anger, but man, she knew I was hot. Don't you touch that little child again. And I knew there was nothing I could really do about it. And I went, like you all do, I went to bed that night, and I think I fell asleep for like 40 minutes, and I woke up. And all night, all I could think of was that kid. I thought, well, that's really bad, that's really strange. And it was the town is, kind of socioeconomically challenged, put it that way. And the next night I couldn't sleep. And then I had this thought, I wonder how many kids like that are in this little community in Texas, in this rural area. And so I went down to the courthouse and I said, is there like a child welfare board? Well, we kind of have a group of volunteers and, I wanted to find out. And what are the statistics? Oh, we got a big problem and the foster care is a problem. And this is a really big issue in this whole county. And so they're meeting actually today. You should go down there and find out. So I go down and kind of imagine a town of about 2,500, no stoplight. This is the only people that will really care. And I don't mean this in a pejorative way because I really became friends with them, but there was a lovely lady about 90 who was leading the group. Well, Bert, Ethel, what do you think we should talk about this week? And I just went, oh my gosh. And so I told them my story and said, I did some research and what are we going to do? What are you going to do about this? And I sat down with them and an hour and a half later, I walked out of the Child Welfare Board as the new chairman, And then I decided, well, heck, if I'm the chairman, I can appoint people. And so I went in our church and I found 2 or 3 business people that I knew had a heart for this. And I met with 2 or 3 other pastors. And then pretty soon, I'll tell you what, then every weekend, different churches were saying, okay, we need these size clothes to help these kids, and who can take in this family for a week or 2? And then another 2 or 3 years, and then we saw that it was a systemic problem. Then we came together and we raised money, and we built a child welfare building right next to the courthouse or that area where all the public. And what I realized was that county changed because someone got mad. I'm convinced Christians aren't mad enough about the right things. This church is making a significant difference in the sex trade because someone got mad and said that shouldn't happen here. Some of the greatest things that have ever happened is someone looks at injustice. Let me ask you this. What do you see in the world that is wrong and shouldn't be that makes you mad enough to get off your rear end and stop talking about it and start doing something about it? See, anger is a God-given emotion. And it can be very, very positive. By contrast, it can be very, very negative. We're given the command in Ephesians 4:26 positively, be angry, it's a command. But don't sin. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. And we'll hit this a little bit later because the next verse talks about lest you give the devil a foothold. Unresolved anger, stuffed anger, exploding anger is a window in which the enemy, spiritual warfare, really occurs. It's probably the most normal way that you're experiencing lies and condemnation and all kinds of struggles that you never connect with spiritual warfare and anger. But negatively, notice what the wisest man in the world says about anger. Proverbs 19:19, a hot-tempered man must pay the penalty. If you rescue him, you'll have to do it again. Translation, there's consequences. When you make decisions, when I say something or you say something out of anger, there's a penalty. And by the way, it's habitual. If you do it, people that get into anger patterns, this is how you relate. This is what you do. This is what I do. Notice the next verse, Proverbs 22:24. Do not make friends with a hot-tempered man. Do not associate with one easily angered. Why? It's contagious. By the way, for some of you that are parents, guess where your kids are learning how to handle their anger? Watching you. We'll learn that some of you spew it out, some of you stuff it down, and some of you leak it. And by the way, it doesn't make you bad. It's how you have learned. What I want you to know is there's a better way. There's a godly way to deal with your anger. Anger is a lot like fire. You know, fire in a container can bring warmth and light and fuel things. Fire that's unrestricted, as we just saw recently in California, remember? I mean, it just blew through a whole forest and took out a whole town. There's whole family systems, there's whole workplaces, there's whole churches, there's whole small groups that are just a mess because of anger that was unchecked. Finally, notice Proverbs 29:22. An angry man stirs up dissension, and a hot-tempered one commits many sins. When you're angry, you do stupid, ungodly things like I do. And it's disunifying. In fact, notice in your notes, I've given you some questions to ponder. I want you to think about these, okay? This isn't for someone else. This is for us. Have you ever done something you wish you hadn't when you were angry? Yes or no? Everyone who said no is a liar. Number 2, have you ever said something you wish you could take back when you were angry? I don't love you anymore. I wish you were never been born. I hate you. You can take this job and shove it. At which time you go home and your mate says, so how did the day go? You know, I got sick and tired of that supervisor boss telling me what to do and treat me that way. So what happened? I told him he could take this job and shove it. So how are we going to pay our bills? And do you have another job? And all of a sudden you realize, maybe I should have rethought that one, at least on the timing. Have you ever made a bad decision when you were angry? One that you look back and makes you think, without a doubt, that was the dumbest thing I've ever done. Have you ever ruined a friendship, a marriage, a family relationship, a ministry relationship, or a business situation because you were angry? And finally, have you ever seen a person hurt because of someone's anger physically, emotionally, or psychologically? I have lived for now over 40 years with a woman who grew up with a father who had incredible anger issues, who marred all 3 of his daughters psychologically in ways that every one of them have required counseling. But by the grace of God, in renewing your mind and beginning to get God's view of things, I've watched my wife not stuff everything or assume that when there's ever a problem, it must be her fault because how she was treated for years growing up.